Welcome to No Sleep, where the night never ends, and every whisper in the dark could be something real. Tonight's story isn't just horror. It's a memory, a warning, a door that should have stayed closed. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. You don't stumble into Flintridge. You get swallowed by it. That's the first thing my mother ever taught me, the way some parents teach the alphabet. Around here, we don't brag. There are no highway signs telling you to slow down for antiques or pie. No cute hashtags, no Chamber of Commerce drone footage. If you find Flintridge, it means you took a wrong turn, and the wrong turn like the taste of you. By daylight, we look almost normal. Porches, mailboxes, a barber who can do a tight fade if you bring cash and keep your questions light. Kids bike to the corner store for red licorice and soda that never seems cold enough. Dogs sleep like spilled laundry on sun-warmed steps. But that's surface stuff, the paint a realtor slaps over water damage. If you live here long enough, you learn to see what the paint is hiding. The way the wind shuts up all at once, like it remembered something it shouldn't say. The way the streets pretend they don't lead anywhere. The way the town looks like a photograph that's been smiling too long. We have rules, but we don't post them. You learn them the way you learn to breathe. You learn them in whispers, crossing pews. In the librarian's quiet throat clearing when the afternoon light thins out. You learn them when your neighbor points at your porch light as dusk starts to kneel and says, "Not bright enough," like they're discussing weather and not survival. Never walk home after dark. Always lock the windows before 9. Don't answer a knock after midnight. Not even a friendly one. Not even if it knows your name. And then there's the rule nobody says out loud. Don't ask why. The town hates that word. Why is a pry bar? Why is noise? Flintridge lives on silence. It eats it. It asks for seconds. I was born here. I tried to leave 3 times before I learned to stop packing a bag. That's the thing about a place like this. People will tell you the roads are bad, that the bus routes are cut, that opportunities don't pass through. That's not it. The roads are fine. The buses run on time. The problem is the town has a hand around your ankle, and it squeezes whenever you look up toward the horizon. In school, they teach us the good American stories. Leaving, becoming, bigger skies. Our guidance counselor had posters of mountains and words like possibility and pathways in all caps, as if volume were a compass. We had visitors once, some college people from somewhere with stone buildings and owl logos. They asked what we wanted to be when we grew up. Some kids said, engineer, nurse, electrician. I said gone. Everyone laughed the way you laugh at a baby cursing. When evening comes, Flintridge changes its face. The color drains from the air. Porch talk thins into nods. The grocery closes early for inventory, which is what we call fear when we want it to wear a tie. The sheriff does an extra loop, not because it helps, but because the headlights make a kind of prayer on the asphalt. If you peek down Sycamore or Laurel or Birch after sunset, you'll notice there's nothing on the street. No cats, no cigarette tips, no teenagers pretending they're immortal. It's not curfew. It's common sense with a blade inside it. If you ask the old folks how long it's been like this, they'll say, long enough. If you ask them what happened to the ones who ask too many questions, they'll look at your shoes and say they hope you keep yours tied. Me, I used to stand at my bedroom window and practice leaving with my eyes. I'd track the telephone wires as they ran out of town and try to imagine where they landed. cities with light like music, bridges that shone like clean teeth. I'd picture my feet stepping over the county line as if it were a sleeping snake. Sometimes I'd almost taste the air on the other side, less sweet, more sharp, like something that could wake you. And then the light would change. People who haven't lived here don't understand what dusk feels like. They think it's just a color, a mood filter you can snap onto a picture. Here, dusk is a weight. It presses down on roofs and shoulders. It squeezes breath into the tight shape of a held note. The birds shut up too soon. The crickets start too late. Even the mosquitoes hesitate like they're waiting for a cue. There's a sound you learn to hear if you're born here. The first click of night. The moment the world throws a switch. It's not loud. It's not even real, probably. But we all hear it. The first time I heard it, I was 5, playing on the rug with a little plastic horse whose legs never bent right. My mother stopped drying a glass and looked at the window like someone had knocked. Nobody had. But she turned the deadbolt anyway. Why? I asked. There's that bad word again. Because we like tomorrow, she said, smiling in a way that wasn't for me. In Flintridge, our smiles have jobs. Some nights, I think the town is kind in its way. It gives you warnings. It tells you the oven is on, the dog is out, your shoe is untied. It speaks in porch bulbs and drawn curtains and the early squeak of a closing deli door. It speaks in neighborly texts. Home yet? It speaks in the way the air goes thick, like a room full of breath, held in the same chest. Some nights I think kindness is the wrong word. What Flintridge gives you is a choice that isn't a choice. Lock up, shut up, sit still, wait for morning. If morning comes, you did it right. I used to think I could outsmart it. I'd memorize the rules like math facts and promise myself I'd be the one to bend them without breaking. I'd say I would leave at noon and stay gone by dusk. I'd say I would keep my windows locked, but my mind open. I'd say I'd be fast, careful, invisible, a needle slipping between stitches. Then I met Marnie, and the rules turned into dares. But that's another night. Tonight is just me at the window, watching the town take in a long breath and hold it. Somewhere, a screen door sighs closed. Somewhere, a dog whines once and then remembers. The sky is a bruise that hasn't decided whether to darken. My phone dings. Mom's single-word text that means everything. Lights. I flip the switch. The porch bulb wakes, a small sun with a job to do. Across the street, Mr. Adler's bulb answers. 2 doors down, the Mitchells. One by one, the street freckles itself with yellow until it looks like a map of all the places we're not allowed to go. Flintridge is not a prison. Prisons have fences and forms and guards who clock out. Flintridge is a mouth, and at night it closes. If you live here, you learn to stay behind the teeth. Tomorrow, someone will say the weather's turning. Tomorrow, someone will ask about my plans after graduation, like there's a road that runs straight out. Tomorrow will come, if we deserve it. That's the deal. You don't say from whom. For now, I lock the windows. I count the clicks. I sit with the silence until it feels like it's sitting with me, and I wait for the sound only we can hear. The soft, private click that says the town is done being nice. We used to meet where the tracks cleave the field like a scar. 2 iron lines, running straight until the heat bends them simped into a mirage. It wasn't special. That was the point. A place built for leaving, where nothing stays long enough to rot. Marnie liked the way the ties thudded underfoot when you walked the rails. It's like the town's heartbeat, she'd say, then smirk. If it has one, she'd been in Flintridge 3 months and still wore her city like a jacket she refused to hang up. Sharp eyeliner, chipped black nail polish, boots that clacked too loud on our polite sidewalks. She called our grocery a museum for cans, and our church a room for people afraid of questions. I told her our rules were not superstition, but plumbing. Silent systems that kept the house from flooding. She laughed at that too, and brought her dad's cigarettes to the tracks. If there was one thing we were good at, it was pretending. We pretended the train still came, that the rust didn't chew the rails at night. We pretended the Polaroid she stole wasn't older than both of us combined. She liked to frame me against the tree line, my face washed flat by sunset, the empty rails like parentheses around a secret. The photos spit out ghost slow, seeping from gray into almost life. We'd fan them in the warm air and argue about whether the camera made us look like people worth remembering. On the night it happened, the heat broke in the late afternoon. Clouds gathered like a jury. Marnie said, "Storm or no storm, I'm not going home yet." Her mom would be at work until 10. Mine would assume I was at the library, which is true if you define library as place where you learn. I brought a hoodie. She didn't. "I don't get cold," she said. And she was right for as long as I knew her. We talked about music and death and the geography of elsewhere. She told me about the year before Flintridge, the bad year she only capitalized, never described. There had been a boy with an older car and a bottle he called medicine. There had been nights that bled into mornings, and a mother who learned how to pack boxes without crying. She didn't tell me more, and I didn't ask. Rules are rules. The sun pulled itself down in the sky, like it was tired of being stared at. The light went big and golden in that way that makes even broken glass look holy. I remember thinking we were safe, because everything was so obvious. Every edge outlined, every shadow attached to something. The air smelled like warm metal and cut grass, and something sweet with a bruise under it. "Take one of me," she said, handing me the camera. She stepped backward onto the rails, spread her arms like a bad idea. Chin up, grin set to dare. I framed her. The long slash of track, the smear of pink over the field, her hair a black flag against it. I clicked. The camera coughed out a white square. "Again," she said, this time closer. We kept doing that. Click, cough, fan, until the stack of squares grew sticky in my hand, and the light slid away faster than I remembered it could. She stubbed a cigarette on the rail and ground it with her heel. "One more," she said, and that's when a small, stupid bell rang in my head, the one my mother tuned when I was 5. "Enough." "What time is it?" she asked. I checked. 8:52. The number looked wrong, like a typo God had made. "We should go," I said. "We've cut it closer than this," she said, which wasn't true, but courage doesn't need facts, just volume. "We should go," I said again, louder this time, matching hers. She rolled her eyes, but she started walking. We followed the dirt path to Sycamore, where the trees lean in like they are sharing gossip, and the streetlights, when they work, paint weak halos on the pavement. A breeze came through, cold from nowhere, and the hair on my arms stood up like it recognized something before I did. Sycamore looked emptied, not just of people, but of intention. The porches were lit, yellow coins nailed to the night, but no moths battered themselves against them. No TVs muttered behind the curtains, no clink of late dishes in sinks. The air felt padded. Someone had lined the world with felt. "Why is it so quiet?" Marnie whispered. Whispering felt like the right currency. Because we're late, I said. That's when I felt it. Not a sound, not a smell. A pressure change. Like the weather in a tiny room. The kind of thing your body knows before the part of you that names it. We turned the corner, and Sycamore stretched out like a mouth without teeth. At the far end, where the street tips into dark, something stood. Not someone. Something. It was tall, too tall, thin in the wrong places, the way a drawing is when a hand slips. Its arms hung long enough to look like a mistake. Its head tilted, a broken marionette angle. Curious or cruel, or both. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt watched the way you feel, stared at from the second floor of a house you thought was empty. My brain did a trick to protect itself. It gave the shape a nonsense name, the way you nickname a tumor. Peter, it said, as if a human syllable could put a leash on it. Do you see? I started, but Marnie was already moving, quickening into a run that made sense with the animal part of the night. We ran, sneakers slapping the street in the rhythm of mistake. The houses blurred, each one a lit throat we could not crawl into. I tried to keep her in front of me because if I could see her, I could count her as existing. I remember the sound of my breathing and the absence of everything else. No dog barked, no car turned the corner. The world held us like breath. At the second cross street, something lunged. I didn't see it begin. One moment there was space beside the old pharmacy, a wedge of shadow regular as a door. The next, that shadow had seams and a hinge, and it opened into us. There was no roar, no hiss, no script from the part of the brain that knows what animals do when they go for the throat. There was only subtraction. Marnie was there, and then she was not. The air where she had been snapped closed like elastic. Her Polaroids flew from my grip, a white confetti of faces that had barely formed. One landed against my cheek, wet and stuck. On it, the gray was still resolving. For an instant, some bad private instant, I thought the picture was of her leaving, that the camera had caught the act the way a lightning photo catches a burn. But the square stayed empty, a blank rectangle of almost. I kept running because my legs didn't know how to do anything else. I didn't turn toward the shadow. I didn't scream. Screaming felt like something the town was hungry for. I ran past the place where she had been and was now an algebra problem with no solution. The thing at the end of the street did not chase. It watched, head tipped, like it was grading our performance. Front door, keys, wrong key again. Palm on wood, shoulder. A crack in the frame I'd never noticed. Then in, and the deadbolts clacked so loud it felt like a slap. I slid to the kitchen floor with my back to the door, mouth full of copper, lungs trying to find a pattern. My mother stood at the sink, a dish in her hands, water running as if this were a normal night, and I was a normal person who had come home on time. She didn't look at me right away. She watched the window. The glass held our small, safe reflection, and something else, something taller just outside of seeing. "You're late," she said, voice small and ordinary, like a coin you could spend anywhere. I started, and the words nodded. She set the dish down, turned off the water, finally turned to me. "You were lucky," she said, and the way she said it made it worse. Like luck is a thing you borrow at interest. It often goes for girls first. "What is it?" I asked, but maybe I didn't. Maybe the question only happened inside me, where it couldn't get out and make more trouble. She didn't answer. The window did, a little, a flash of movement that might have been a curtain in another house. Might have been nothing. In the street, something leaned close to the glass of the night, as if checking its reflection. In my hand, the last Polaroid finished developing. I looked down. The gray had deepened into a picture. The rails, the field, the smear of pink, the space where Marnie stood, newly, perfectly blank. Morning in Flintridge never feels like a rescue. It's not sunlight pouring in like mercy, or the air to tasting fresher because you survived the night. It's more like waking up in a room that someone else has already been inside. Everything exactly where you left it, but touched in ways you can't prove. The day after Marnie vanished, the sky came up pale and apologetic, as if it knew too much. My body felt wrong, like my bones had been taken out and put back in, while I slept, maybe in a slightly different order. I stayed in bed long enough to miss first period, staring at the ceiling's hairline cracks until they formed shapes my mind didn't want to name. No sirens, no search parties, no curious neighbors asking if I'd seen her. The silence was deliberate, the way you don't bring up the name of a relative who drank too much at Thanksgiving. When I finally walked into school, the hallway chatter felt forced, like actors hitting their lines too hard. People weren't whispering about Marnie. They weren't whispering about anything. Even her desk in English was already cleared, her name stripped from the seating chart. No textbooks stacked. No gum wrappers wedged in the metal tray beneath the chair. At lunch, I overheard the new girl from science class asking someone where Marnie was. She got a shrug so casual it felt cruel. The shrugger said, "Guess she left. That happens here." Then they changed the subject to a math test. The way everyone acted, like she had never been here, made me question myself. Maybe I dreamed the whole thing. Maybe the tracks, the shadow, the way the air folded in on itself, that was all just my brain rewriting some ordinary goodbye. But then, my mother's words from the night before slid back into my head. It often goes for girls first. She'd said it like she'd been keeping count. That evening, I asked her directly, where did it take her? She didn't pause. "They're getting married," she said. No smile, no blink, just those 4 words dropped into the air like a dead bird. Married to who? Her eyes didn't move from the potatoes she was peeling. We don't ask those questions. I wanted to scream at her, grab the knife from her hand and slam it into the counter until the blade bent. But the silence in the room was thick, and I felt it watching, listening. Something about it told me anger was the wrong currency to spend here. Later, I went to Marnie's house. Her mom answered the door with the chain still on. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from something that had been happening for much longer than grief. She said Marnie had gone back somewhere. She wouldn't say where. "You don't believe that," I told her. She just stared at me for a long time and said, "You weren't supposed to see that." "See what?" "They don't like being seen." Then she shut the door. Over the next week, I started noticing the 13ths. It was almost embarrassing I hadn't seen it before. Every month on the 13th, someone was missing the next day. Sometimes a kid, sometimes an adult. Once a teacher we all liked. No bodies, no notes, no explanations, and never any police. We didn't even have a cemetery, because in Flintridge the dead don't stay, and the missing don't return. I asked my father about it one night when he was drunk enough to be honest. His eyes got that wet glass look, and he said, "Because it follows. You can't run from something that lives in silence." That's when I realized Marnie wasn't the first. She wasn't even special. She was just the newest name on a list the town didn't write down. But it wasn't just the disappearances that gnawed at me. It was how quickly the holes closed, like the person had been an ice cube dropped into hot water, there for a blink, then nothing but a ripple, and then not even that. And I started to wonder if forgetting them wasn't an accident. Maybe it was part of the deal. That's when my father told me about the meeting. Not a town hall, not with minutes and coffee. This was back in the 80s, when kids were vanishing so often that the town couldn't keep its stories straight anymore. One night, the power went out for exactly 7 seconds. When it came back, there was something standing in the square. Tall, black, faceless. He said everyone heard the same thing, not with their ears, but like it was slipped into their blood. Give me what you can spare, and I will let the rest stay. And the people, our people, agreed. That's when I understood. Marnie hadn't been taken because she was unlucky. She'd been given. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. The 13ths mark time in Flintridge more than calendars or seasons. Forget birthdays or holidays. Here, the month is measured in the number of safe days you have left before the next one. I started tracking them after Marnie. At first, it was just tally marks in the back of a notebook. April 13th, Mr. Calhoun, the postman. May 13th, little Kayla from my street. June 13th, nobody I knew. But someone's curtains stayed closed for weeks. The missing were always different. Kids, adults, men, women, even the mayor once. But there were rules inside the rule. Never two from the same family in a row. Never anyone too new to town, unless they'd been here long enough to be noticed. It was like the thing, whatever it was, wanted variety, but also permanence. Like a collector who never took from the same shelf twice in a row. The strangest part, nobody ever looked. No search parties. No "have you seen me" posters curling on telephone poles. The day after a disappearance, the town carried on as though the missing had never been here. Their lockers got cleared before the bell. Their mail stopped arriving. Their houses either went dark or changed hands before you could notice the for sale sign. At first, I thought it was fear. Then I realized it was obedience. I tested this once, mentioned Marnie's name out loud in the diner, just to see what would happen. Forks froze halfway to mouths. People stared at their plates like the food had secrets. And then, without a word, they all started eating again, chewing slow, like they were pretending I hadn't said anything. That was when I started thinking about the deal my father had told me. He'd called it the meeting, but really it was a surrender. Back in the 80s, when the disappearances were happening too often to ignore, the townsfolk had gathered one night, desperate and afraid. They didn't plan for the power to cut out, or for the lights to come back and reveal something standing in the middle of the square. Dad said it was tall, 8 feet at least. No face, no mouth, but it didn't need either to speak. Every person there heard the same voice inside their head. Give me what you can spare, and I will let the rest stay. Not a threat, not even an offer, just terms. And the town agreed. From that night on, the rules became religion. The 13ths became ritual. The disappearances weren't a tax anymore. They were tithes, the price of living here. There were even quiet jobs created around it. Certain people kept track of who was due. Certain others made sure the chosen were in the right place at the wrong time. The unlucky never knew they'd been selected until the air got heavy and the world stopped breathing. The scariest part, some of them went willingly. I didn't believe it until I saw it myself. One night, I watched from my bedroom window as Mrs. Kavanaugh, white hair, always smelling like cinnamon, walked calmly out her front door at 11:57. She didn't lock it, didn't even close it all the way. She just stepped into the street, nightgown fluttering in the warm wind, and headed toward the woods at the edge of town. I thought about calling out to her, but my throat closed before I could. She didn't stumble, didn't flinch. She was walking like she knew where she was going and who was waiting. She didn't come back. The next day, her house was already being emptied. By dinner, the place looked like no one had lived there for years. It was then I realized the deal wasn't just about survival. It was about control. The thing, Peter, as my mind insisted on calling it, had taught the town to police itself. No outsiders, no questions, no defiance. And maybe worst of all, no hope. Because if you accept that the 13ths are part of the natural order, like tides or seasons, then you stop looking for a way out. But I wasn't ready to accept it. Not yet. If you're ready, next I'll continue with part 5, The Long Leash, where I try to escape Flintridge, only to learn that the town's reach doesn't end at its borders. This is where the horror stops being nightbound and starts following me into daylight. The first time I tried to leave, I told myself it was just a test, proof that the rules only worked if you believed in them. I waited until a week after the 13th, when the air still felt loose and the nights had no particular weight to them. I packed light, a duffel bag, cash scraped from mowing lawns, my father's old flashlight. I left at noon, when the sun was still high enough to burn doubt out of your head. By the time I hit the county line, the asphalt shimmered in the heat, and I could see the green highway sign like it was promising something. Cities with real grocery stores, people who didn't talk in whispers, air that didn't remember your name. That's when the engine sputtered, twice, then died. I checked the gas, full. I checked the battery, fine. But every time I turned the key, the car made that dead click, like it was refusing to participate. I tried to call for help, but there was no signal. Just the faint hiss of a line listening for something that wasn't me. I started walking, but the road felt longer than it should have, stretching in a way that made my calves ache faster than normal. I remember thinking, if I just keep going, I'll make it. Then I blinked, and I was in my bed. No memory of turning around, no recollection of climbing the porch steps or unlocking the door. The duffel was gone. My shoes were dry, even though the pavement had been melting in the sun. The second time, I didn't bother with the car. I walked. I made it 2 towns over by dusk. I even paid cash for a room in a motel with flickering neon and a receptionist who didn't ask for ID. The sheets smelled like bleach and cigarettes, but I didn't care. I'd done it. That night, I dreamed of Marnie. She stood in the hallway of the motel, head tilted the same way the thing on Sycamore Street had tilted. Her lips moved, but the sound didn't make it through the dream. All I heard was the faint, wet tap of her bare feet on the carpet in nocturne as she stepped closer. When I woke, the ceiling above me wasn't cracked motel plaster. It was my own. My nose was bleeding. The front door was locked from the inside. My shoes sat neatly by the bed. The third time, I didn't even try to be clever. I thought maybe the trick was to go without preparation. Just walk out and keep walking. No plan, no bag, no clock to measure the distance. I made it as far as the edge of the forest before I heard it. 3 knocks. Not on a door, on a tree. The sound was deep, resonant, the kind that travels through your rib cage instead of your ears. I froze. The knocks came again. Same rhythm, slow enough to feel deliberate, like someone was giving me time to answer. When I turned, it was there. The same long-limbed silhouette from that night with Marnie, standing between two pines, head angled, arms swaying slightly like it was keeping balance on a rope only it could see. The space where its eyes should have been felt heavy, hot, like a flashlight beam pressing into my skin. I dropped whatever willpower I'd gathered and walked back toward town. Not ran, walked. Running felt like it would trigger something I couldn't survive. My feet followed the path without me telling them to, each step erasing a little more of my resolve. By the time I reached Main Street, the thing was gone, but the air still held that quiet, padded weight. That's when I realized the borders of Flintridge aren't marked by signs or fences. They're marked by the town itself, an invisible leash that snaps you back before you get too far. Some people might call that magic. Others might call it a curse. I call it ownership, and it doesn't matter how far you think you've gone. If Flintridge has claimed you, it keeps you. If you live in Flintridge long enough, you learn not to listen for noise. You listen for its absence. The hum of the refrigerator, the sigh of wind between houses, the far-off bark of a dog. Those are normal, comforting. But when the silence arrives, thick, padded, sealing your ears like you've gone underwater, that's when you know you're not alone, no matter how empty the street looks. After my third failed escape, I decided the only way out wasn't through the borders. It was under them. And by under, I mean the cracks. Every system has them. The silence in Flintridge was no different. I started small, walking routes I wasn't supposed to, alleys between the oldest buildings, the forgotten trails behind the high school, the service tunnels near the water tower. These places felt different. Not safe exactly, but overlooked, like the town's attention didn't quite reach them. In one of those alleys, I found the first map. It wasn't a map in the usual sense, just a page torn from a ledger, water-stained and almost illegible. But it had markings, circles, dates, and a single phrase scrawled in red ink at the bottom. 13 S tithe, 14 Dietzka breathing room. The handwriting was unfamiliar, old, the kind that looked like it belonged in a teacher's gradebook from the 1950s. I kept it hidden in the lining of my backpack. That night, I went to the library. Our librarian, Mrs. Devereaux, has been here longer than anyone. Her skin so pale it looks like paper left in a dark drawer. She didn't look up when I came in. Didn't need to. History's on the left, but you already know that, she said, voice like dry leaves. The history section was dusty but intact. Rows of yearbooks, newspapers on microfilm, property records. I started combing through them, looking for anything about sudden vanishings, weird council meetings, unexplained power outages, and I found them. They were all there, but are written in the language of small-town politeness, relocated instead of missing, community adjustment instead of pact. The meeting from the 80s, listed as an informal gathering regarding public safety. The power outage, described as brief disruption, no action required. But in the margins of the microfilm copies, someone had been leaving notes, small, cramped handwriting. At first, I thought they were librarians' marks, but no, these were personal, angry, the same hand as the ledger page. One note read, "It doesn't keep them all, only the ones we let it see." That sentence became my obsession. If the thing only took who the town let it see, maybe that meant there were ways to hide people from it. ways to blind it, at least long enough to get them out. But as soon as I started thinking that way, things began to change. My father started locking his liquor cabinet. My mother stopped leaving me grocery lists. Neighbors I barely knew started bumping into me everywhere, in line at the store, at the post office, even outside the library at closing time. Their smiles felt stiff, like masks made of skin. One night, I found a note taped to my bedroom window. No handwriting, just block letters cut from magazines, ransom note style. Stop digging, it hears. I didn't sleep that night. The silence outside was too perfect, too heavy, like it was pressing its ear to the glass. The next day, I saw movement in the corner of my eye while walking past the old church. Someone was in the bell tower. No bell has rung there since before I was born, but the figure, a thin man in a dark coat, was leaning out, watching me. When I looked back a second time, he was gone. It was then I realized the cracks weren't just in the silence. They were in the people. There were others here, hidden in plain sight, who didn't accept the deal, who were pushing against it in ways so small the town hadn't noticed. Or maybe it had noticed, and it was saving them for later. The 13th came on a Tuesday. I woke up already knowing, not from a calendar or from counting days, just the weight in the air, that subtle tightening you feel before a fist closes. By noon, the streets had that funeral kind of quiet. Curtains stayed drawn even though the sun was high. The grocery had a closed for maintenance sign taped to the door, but the lights inside were still on. Nobody was shopping. Nobody was anywhere. That's how it works. You don't want to be seen on the 13th. If you're out, you might be chosen. But I wasn't planning on hiding this time. For weeks, I'd been working through the cracks, mapping the old utility tunnels, memorizing the blind spots between street lamps, the places where the silence felt thinner. I had one goal: intercept the tithe before it reached Peter, hide them, blind the thing long enough to break the pattern. By 8 p.m., I was crouched in the alley behind the old pharmacy, flashlight in one hand, the ledger page in my pocket. The chosen one tonight was a boy named Aaron, junior at the high school, quiet, the kind of kid who always carried too many books. I knew because the man in the bell tower had told me. He didn't tell me with words, just slipped a photo of Aaron under my door, the date, 13, scrawled on the back. At 8:47, I saw him, walking fast down Sycamore, head down, like he was trying to beat the dark. Then the air changed, thickened. The streetlights flickered once, then held steady, but the spaces between them seemed to grow wider. Something was coming. I moved. "Aaron," I hissed from the alley. "In here." He froze. Looked at me like I was part of the danger, which, to be fair, I might have been. But then I saw it at the far end of the street. The tall, jointed silhouette, head tilted like it was listening to something inside his chest. Aaron saw it too. That's what made him run toward me. We cut through the alley, the dark pressing in behind us like a tide. My plan was to take him into the tunnels, keep moving until the sun came up. I'd even stashed food and water down there. We made it halfway. The knock came, 3 times, on the brick wall to our left. The sound shuddered through my bones. Aaron stumbled, clutching his ears. I grabbed his arm. "Don't stop." The second knock was louder, closer. The walls seemed to bend toward us, the bricks stretching like they were breathing. Then it stepped into the alley. Up close, Peter wasn't just tall. It was wrong in ways my eyes didn't want to understand. Its limbs were too long, but not inhuman. more like they'd been pulled, stretched by some slow, patient force. The tilt of its head wasn't curiosity. It was hunger, wearing the shape of curiosity. I put myself between it and Aaron, though I had no weapon and no plan beyond that. My heartbeat felt too loud, like it might give us away, even though we were already seen. "Take me," I said. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me knew the deal was older than me, older than my parents. Maybe because I wanted to choose something for once, even if it was my own ending. The head tilt shifted, almost approving. Aaron bolted past me. Peter didn't move to stop him. It stepped closer to me instead. The silence deepened until I could hear my own blood moving. And then, without touching me, it spoke. Not in words exactly, but in that same inside-your-skull way my father had described from the meeting in the 80s. "You are not yours to give." And then it was gone. One blink, it was in front of me. The next, it wasn't. I staggered out of the alley. Aaron was gone. So was the air's weight. The street looked normal again, if you ignored the fact that nobody had come outside during the entire thing. The next morning, Aaron's house was empty. His name scraped off his mailbox. His locker already reassigned. The town had swallowed him whole, same as it always did. But here's the thing. Peter had refused me. That meant something. Meant there were rules, even it followed. Meant maybe I wasn't part of the town's menu, which is why I'm writing this now. Because if I'm not food, maybe I'm something worse. Maybe I'm the one it's saving for last.